That is not a valid boarding pass, Derek said, holding the phone between two fingers, the way someone held something they suspected might be counterfeit or dirty. And frankly, ma'am, I don't know where you printed this, but it did not come from our system. Nadia Cole stepped forward from behind her mother's arm. She was 7 years old, small enough that she had to tilt her head back to look up at the man behind the podium, but she did it without flinching. My mommy's pass is real, she said. She bought it. I was there. Derek Holt looked down at the child the way certain adults looked at children who spoke when they had not been invited to. His name tag was pinned straight across a Navy company blazer, and the blazer was pressed so flat it looked like it had never once been worn by a man who doubted himself. Little girl, he said, this is not a conversation for you. Then stop being mean in front of me, Maya said. A woman near the window looked up from her magazine. A man with a carry-on bag stopped rolling it. The gate area at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport had the particular suspended quality of a large space that had suddenly remembered to be small. Nadia Cole stood at the podium with her shoulders straight and her phone still extended toward Derek Holt, the boarding pass glowing on the screen in plain sight. She had driven 2 hours that morning. She had dropped Maya at her sister's the night before so she could pack and sleep and worry about her mother in peace. And then she had gone back early to pick her up because Maya had asked to come, and Nadia had not had the heart to say no. Her mother, Gloria Cole, she was 71 years old and had been admitted to a Memphis hospital 4 days ago with what the doctors were still carefully calling a cardiac event, which was the kind of language hospitals used when they wanted to tell you something serious without yet deciding how serious. Nadia had bought the tickets the same night she got the call. She had not slept much after that. Hello, friends. Welcome. Before we begin, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Are you watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, or somewhere else in the world? We would love to know. And when you finish watching, tell us one thing you learned from the video. Derek Holt had been working gate assignments at Hartsfield-Jackson for 11 years. He had the practiced impatience of a man who had been told he was good at his job enough times that he had stopped questioning whether the job was being done well. He wore the blazer. He wore the name tag. He stood behind the podium at the mouth of the jet bridge, and he decided every single day who moved forward and who did not. That was the shape of his authority, and he had grown comfortable inside it the way a man grew comfortable inside a house he had not built and did not own, but had lived in long enough to forget the difference. He set the phone down on the edge of the podium without scanning it. Ma'am, he said, in the tone reserved for people he had decided were either confused or dishonest and had not yet determined which. Oh, I have run this twice. The confirmation number does not match any active reservation on this flight. That is not a system error. That is a boarding pass that should not exist. Then run it again, Nadia said. I'm not going to keep running something that keeps returning the same result. You haven't scanned it, Nadia said. You looked at the screen. You have not placed that scanner on the barcode. I am asking you to scan it. Derek's jaw shifted. Something moved behind his eyes that was not patience and was not procedure. Are you telling me how to do my job? I am asking you, Nadia said carefully, each word placed with the deliberateness of a woman who understood the tone could be used against her. And me have to scan the barcode on my boarding pass before you tell me in front of all of these people that it is not real. There were perhaps 30 people in the immediate gate area. Some sat in the rows of chairs along the windows. Some stood near the charging stations. A few had gathered without quite meaning to, the way people gathered around the edge of something they could not name but recognized. The boarding zone for the flight to Memphis had been called for Group 1 already. Several passengers with the correct class of service had passed through without incident. Nadia Cole and her daughter had been among the first to approach, and they had not moved forward since. A man in a gray suit near the window had put down his newspaper. A young woman with box braids who worked at the nearby coffee kiosk had gone still behind her counter. An older black woman in a yellow cardigan, seated 2 rows back with a leather tote in her lap, watched without pretending to do otherwise. Maya stood at her mother's side now, pressed close, one hand gripping the strap of her son backpack. She was not crying. She was watching Derek Holt with the focused attention of a child who had not yet learned to disguise what she thought about a person, and what she thought about Derek Holt was written plainly across her face. "He didn't scan it, Mama," she said quietly. "He's just looking at it." Derek turned toward her with the expression of a man who had run out of patience for a conversation he had never considered himself obligated to have. "I need your mother to step aside so other passengers can board." "My mother has a boarding pass," Maya said. "Sure, you should scan it." "Maya," Nadia touched the child's shoulder. "But he didn't scan it." "I know," Nadia said. "I know." Derek straightened behind the podium and addressed the people beginning to back up in the boarding queue. "Folks, I apologize for the delay. We're just going to get this resolved and we'll have everyone moving shortly." Then he looked back at Nadia with the particular expression of a man who had just performed reasonableness for an audience and believed the performance had landed. "Ma'am, I need you to step to the side desk so we can look into this properly." "I will step to the side desk," Nadia said, "if you will scan this boarding pass first, right here, so that everyone present can see what the scanner says." Derek blinked. The request had been reasonable. That was the problem with it. And there was nothing in the request that could be denied without revealing why it was being denied. "This is not how the process works," he said. "Scanning a boarding pass," Nadia replied, "is exactly how the process works. You know that. I know that. The people standing behind me know that." A man near the back of the queue said quietly, "She's right." Derek looked toward the voice, found no face willing to look away, looked back at Nadia. "Step to the side desk," he said. "Now." The side desk was 6 feet from the main podium. It was close enough to the gate area that every exchange at it could still be heard clearly by the people who would remain nearby, which was most of them. Derek had perhaps imagined that moving the conversation would reduce its audience. It did not. He pulled up a screen on the side terminal and typed with the careful speed of a man who wanted to appear thorough without actually being thorough. Nadia stood across the desk from him with Maya against her hip and her phone still in her hand. She watched his screen from her side of the desk. She could not read everything on it, but she could read enough. "The name on the reservation," she said. "Cole, Nadia. 2 passengers, seat 4A and 4B, Memphis, Tennessee." Derek did not look up. "Is that what your screen says?" Nadia asked. "The system is showing a discrepancy." "What kind of discrepancy?" He paused in a way that meant he was deciding how much to say rather than deciding what the truth was. "The payment record shows a transaction, but the seat assignment is not confirmed on our end." Nadia looked at him evenly. "Then the problem is on your end." "The problem," Derek said, "is that this boarding pass did not generate correctly, which typically happens when—" He stopped, started again. "There are a number of reasons a boarding pass can fail to generate correctly." "Such as?" Nadia said. Derek set his jaw. "Such as when it is not purchased through official channels." The side desk went quiet, not the quiet of an empty space, the quiet of people absorbing what had just been said. Maya looked up at her mother. Something in the child's face shifted from watchfulness to something older and harder. "He's saying you didn't buy it right," she said. "I know what he's saying," Nadia told her. "But you did buy it right." "I know." "Then why is he saying that?" Nadia did not answer that one. Some questions were too true to answer in front of the person they were about. The older woman in the yellow cardigan had moved from her seat. She was now standing at the edge of the side desk area, leather tote in hand, making no effort to be invisible. She was perhaps 65, with close-cropped silver hair and the unhurried posture of a woman who had survived enough nonsense to have stopped being impressed by it. She looked at Derek Holt the way women of a certain age and temperament looked at men who were wasting everyone's time. "Young man," she said without raising her voice, "I have been sitting at that gate for 40 minutes. I watched that woman join the boarding queue. I watched her hold out that phone. And I have watched you find 4 different ways to avoid putting that scanner on that barcode." She adjusted the tote strap on her shoulder. "Now what I would like to know is why." Derek turned toward her with the stiffened expression of a man being addressed by someone he had not granted permission to speak. "Ma'am, this is a private matter between a passenger and—" "It became a public matter," she said, "when you started having it in public." 2 of the gate area passengers had moved closer. Not close enough to crowd, but close enough to make clear they were not leaving. The man in the gray suit had folded his newspaper under his arm. The young woman from the coffee kiosk had come around her counter. She was 20-something, attached with box braids and an expression that said she had seen this particular scene before and was done pretending otherwise. She asked him to scan it twice, the young woman said. I heard her, both times. Derek pointed toward her. You need to return to your station. I'm on break, she said without moving. The man in the gray suit spoke then, measured and dry. I fly this airline 40 weeks a year. If there's a valid barcode on that pass, the scanner will read it in 2 seconds. This has been going on for 10 minutes. Derek looked around the small half-circle of witnesses that had formed and arrived at the conclusion that it had become a problem. Not a moral problem, a logistical one, the kind that required a different approach. He picked up the scanner. Nadia Cole held out her phone without a word. Derek brought the scanner to the barcode. The device emitted its short, clean confirmation tone. One note, certain and immediate. He looked at the screen. He did not speak. Maya heard the sound. She knew what it meant even before her mother said anything, because she had watched her mother scan that same pass at security not an hour ago, and it had made the same sound. It worked, she said. I knew it. Nadia was still watching Derek Holt's face. She needed to see what his face did now. Not for satisfaction, for confirmation. Because she had stood at enough desks in enough public places to know that the moment the truth arrived was often the most revealing moment of all, not because of what people said, but because of what they stopped being able to hide. What Derek Holt's face did was go very still. Then it tried to reassemble itself into something professional. It only partially succeeded. The pass is reading, he said. I know, Nadia replied. There may have been a system lag. There may have been, she agreed, and let the agreement sit there between them like something she was not going to move. The older woman in the yellow cardigan said without heat, a system lag, 11 minutes of delay for a woman and her child, in front of a full gate, because of a system lag. Derek straightened. I apologize for the inconvenience. If you'll follow me back to the main podium, I can get you both processed and what I would like, Nadia said in a voice that was quiet and entirely unmovable. Before we go anywhere, is for you to tell me what you actually believed was wrong with my boarding pass. Derek blinked. I explained that there was You told me, Nadia said, that it did not come from your system. You told me it looked like a boarding pass that should not exist. You suggested in front of my daughter and everyone standing within earshot that I had not purchased this ticket through official channels. She paused, gave him the space to hear his own words return to him. Now the scanner has confirmed that this is a valid boarding pass for 2 seats in first class on this flight. So I am asking you very directly what you believed was wrong with it. Derek Holt opened his mouth, closed it. Something flickered in his face that was not guilt and not remorse, but was perhaps the first cousin of both, the cold awareness that he was being asked to say the quiet thing loudly. He did not answer. A man stepped out of the gate area corridor then, not from the queue, not from the chairs. He had come from the direction of the airline's private lounge, which sat at the far end of the terminal, and he moved with the particular, unhurried quality of someone who had never once needed to walk quickly to make something happen. He was perhaps 50, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and had settled into something more durable than handsome. He wore a dark blazer over a white shirt with no tie, and the clothes had the quiet authority of things that cost a great deal without advertising it. He carried nothing, no bag, no phone in his hand, just himself, walking toward the sound of something unresolved. His name was James Caldwell. He had not been introduced to anyone at that gate yet, and he did not introduce himself now. He walked to the edge of the small cluster of people and stopped. He looked at Nadia first, then at Maya, then at Derek Holt, then at the scanner, still in Derek's hand. What's the situation? He asked. The words were addressed to the air between them, which meant they were addressed to whoever was willing to answer honestly. Maya answered first. She looked at the man, looked at his face, decided something in approximately 3 seconds, and then crossed the 2 feet between them and tugged on the sleeve of his blazer. Mister, she said, he told everyone my mommy's boarding pass was fake, but he scanned it and it was real, and now he won't say he was wrong. James Caldwell looked down at the child's hand on his sleeve, then at her face, then at her mother. Nadia met his gaze with the wary measurement of a woman who had learned not to trust rescue from strangers too quickly. There was something about his face, though, that was difficult to locate and equally difficult to dismiss. It was not pity. It was not the particular excitement some people carried when they stumbled into someone else's conflict. It was attention, the kind that did not require anything in return, and that, more than anything else, was what made it bearable. He crouched slightly to meet Maya at something closer to eye level. "What's your name?" "Maya." "And your mama?" "Nadia Cole." He stood again and looked at Derek. "Is that what happened?" Derek cleared his throat. "Sir, there was a verification issue with the passenger's boarding pass. It has since been resolved, and I was in the process of getting everyone—" "I asked if that's what happened," James said. "Not what's happening now." A brief silence passed between them that was not comfortable for everyone present equally. "The pass flagged," Derek said. "Did you scan it before you told her it wasn't valid?" Another silence, shorter but heavier. "There were indicators that suggested—" "Did you scan it first?" James said. "Or did you make the determination before you scanned it?" Derek folded his arms. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but this is an operational matter between this airline and a passenger, and I'm going to have to ask you to—" "My name is James Caldwell," the man said, in the same tone someone used to give directions or state a fact about the weather. The words did not land immediately. Then they did, and the landing was different for different people. Derek Holt heard the name, and his face went through several expressions quickly enough that none of them fully formed. The man in the gray suit who flew this airline 40 weeks a year heard the name and went very still. The young woman from the coffee kiosk heard it and pressed her lips together. The older woman in the yellow cardigan heard it, and something in her expression became deeply, privately satisfied. Maya looked at James, then at her mother. "Who is he?" Nadia was still watching Derek's face. She had seen it change. She had filed away what that meant and set it aside for later, because there was still the matter of what was going to happen next. "James Caldwell," Derek said. His voice had changed. When the scaffolding of borrowed authority had not come down all at once, but it had shifted, and the shift was visible. If I had known—" "Let me stop you there," James said. "Whatever that sentence was going to be, it's a problem. You understand that?" Derek blinked. "Sir, the words I had known imply that what I just watched happen would not have happened if you had known who was standing in the corridor. Is that what you mean to say?" Derek said nothing. "Because if that is what you mean," James continued, "then you are telling everyone here that what this woman and her daughter just experienced had something to do with who they were, rather than what their boarding pass said. And I don't think you want to say that out loud. So I am giving you one opportunity to not say it." The gate area had gone completely still. The kind of still that happened when 30 people simultaneously stopped pretending they were not listening. Derek said, "I was following protocol." "Protocol," the older woman in the yellow cardigan said under her breath, with a precision that made it clear she was not talking to anyone in particular. A second airline employee appeared then, a young man in the same navy blazer, moving quickly from the direction of the operations desk. He saw James Caldwell and stopped walking. Then he began walking again, faster. "Mr. Caldwell," the young man said, slightly out of breath, his voice carrying the compressed urgency of someone who had been told something important approximately 45 seconds ago and had run most of the way. "I'm Marcus Webb, operations supervisor for this terminal. I was just informed—" He glanced at Derek, at Nadia, at Maya, at the cluster of witnesses. He took the information in with the expression of a man assembling a picture he wished were different. "I'm very sorry for any difficulty. If you'll allow me, I can get this completely sorted immediately." "It has been sorted," James said without looking at Marcus. "The boarding pass was valid. The scanner confirmed it. What has not been sorted is the conversation that happened before the scanning." He turned to Nadia. "Ma'am, I apologize for what happened at this gate. That is not a company statement. That is me, speaking directly to you." Nadia held his gaze for a moment. "What I want to know," she said, "is why he told me my boarding pass was fraudulent before he looked at the barcode." James turned back to Derek. I would like to know the same thing. Derek Holt had the look of a man standing on ground that had been solid an hour ago and was now doing something different beneath his shoes. He was still behind the desk, which gave him the physical appearance of authority, but physical appearance and actual authority had parted ways approximately 5 minutes earlier, and the separation was now visible to everyone present. I observed indicators, he started, that suggested the document might not have been generated through standard channels. What indicators? Nadia asked. The formatting of my boarding pass, Nadia said clearly, was generated through the airline's own application, on my phone, which I downloaded from the official app store, after purchasing 2 first-class tickets 6 weeks ago using my credit card, which sent me a confirmation email, which I have, along with the bank statement, which I also have. She said each sentence with the patience of a woman placing bricks, not in anger, but in architecture. What in the formatting told you it was not generated through standard channels? Derek said nothing. The young woman from the coffee kiosk said quietly, from where she stood, because it didn't tell him anything. That's why he can't answer. Several people nearby made sounds of agreement that they did not bother to suppress. Maya, who had been watching Derek Holt for the last several minutes with the focused scrutiny she usually reserved for people in movies who were about to do something bad, said to James almost conversationally, "He decided before he looked." James glanced down at her. "What did you say? Nuts, Maya?" "He decided before he looked," she repeated. "He saw my mommy, and he decided. Then he looked after, and he was wrong, but he didn't want to say it." The gate area absorbed that sentence the way spaces absorb sentences that were too accurate to argue with, by going quiet around them. Nadia closed her eyes briefly. Not in defeat, in the specific way a person closed their eyes when something true arrived from an unexpected direction and required a moment to be received properly. Her daughter was 7 years old and had diagnosed the entire event in 2 sentences, while the adults around her had spent 11 minutes finding language for it. James looked at Derek Holt for a long time. Long enough that looking away would have cost Derek something. Derek did not look away, but it cost him something anyway. "Marcus," James said, without turning. "Yes, sir. I want a written account of this incident on my desk before this flight lands in Memphis. I want the gate footage from 30 minutes before boarding to now. I want the names of every employee at this desk during the exchange. And I want those 2 passengers," he indicated Nadia and Maya, "seated and comfortable before anyone else boards." Marcus Webb was already writing on a tablet. "Understood. I also want to know," James said, "how many prior passenger concerns have been filed against this desk assignment in the last 18 months? Marcus looked up from the tablet. Something in his face suggested he already knew the answer was not nothing and did not want to be the one to say it here. "I'll pull that before we land," he said. Derek said, "Sir, I have to object to the suggestion that I have a pattern of—" "You can object in writing," James said, turning back to Nadia. "When the time comes to do that." Nadia Cole stood at the side desk with her phone still in her hand and looked at James Caldwell the way she looked at most things that seemed to be offering her something, with the careful attention of a woman who had learned not to confuse someone's intention with the thing itself. He seemed genuine. The apology had been plain and specific, without the softening language institutions use to absorb blame without actually taking it. She had noticed that. She noticed most things. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "can I ask you something directly? Please. If you had not been in that corridor," she said, "what would have happened to us?" The question sat in the air without embarrassment. It was not an accusation. It was the most honest question available, and they both knew it. James said, "I've been thinking about that since I walked over here." "And? You would have been delayed long enough to miss first-class boarding. You might have been moved to coach. You might have been told the flight was full and offered a rebooking." He paused. "And you would have left this airport carrying something that was not your fault, and probably telling yourself it was smaller than it was, because that is what people do when they have somewhere important to be and not enough time to fight." Nadia exhaled slowly. "My mother is in a hospital in Memphis." Something in James Caldwell's face shifted, not into pity, into recognition. "Then we need to get you on this plane," he said. "Right now." He reached for Nadia's carry-on bag before she had the chance to reach for it herself. The gesture was quiet and unremarkable, the way a man picked up something heavy when he was standing close enough to do it without announcement, and Nadia noted it because she noted everything. He did not wait to be thanked. He did not look around to see if anyone had seen him do it. He simply held the bag and turned toward the jet bridge. Maya walked beside her mother and looked up at James with the open-faced analysis of a child who had not yet learned to make that kind of observation discreetly. "Do you own this airport?" she asked. "Not this one," he said. "Do you own the plane?" A brief pause. "Some of them." Maya's eyebrows rose. "How many?" "Maya," Nadia said. "A fair number," James said. Maya absorbed this. "Are you the boss of that man?" "In a manner of speaking." "Then you can make him say sorry." James looked at her seriously, with the full attention of an adult who understood that children who ask direct questions deserve direct answers. "I can make sure he is accountable," he said. "Whether the apology comes from him is something only he can decide. But I can tell you that accountability is more durable than an apology from someone who doesn't mean it." Maya thought about that. "So you can make it hurt without making him say sorry." James said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "You are 7 years old?" "Yes." "That is an extraordinary amount of clarity for 7 years old." Maya shrugged. "Grandma Gloria says things that are true don't need to be complicated." The jet bridge was cool and narrow and smelled like recycled air and the particular industrial calm of airport infrastructure. A flight attendant named Patricia met them at the aircraft door, a woman in her 50s with silver at her temples and the composed efficiency of someone who had been doing her job long enough that no configuration of passengers surprised her. She looked at Nadia, then at Maya, then at James, and then at the carry-on he was still holding, and she read the whole situation in approximately 4 seconds. "Mrs. Cole," she said warmly and immediately, "we've been expecting you. Welcome aboard." The difference in those words compared to the words at the podium hit Nadia somewhere between her ribs and her throat. And she had been expecting you was 4 words. Welcome aboard was 2. They were the most ordinary words available, and they nearly undid her. Maya said, "She said we were expected." "I heard her," Nadia said. "Like we belonged." Nadia pressed her lips together and nodded. "Like we belonged." Their seats were 4A and 4B, window and aisle, wide and quiet and exactly what the ticket had promised. Maya went to the window seat immediately and pressed both palms to the glass, then remembered her manners and sat back properly. Nadia lowered herself into the aisle seat and stayed there for a moment without doing anything, which was the first moment since entering the airport that she had allowed herself not to do something. James stowed the carry-on in the overhead compartment and straightened. He did not take the seat across the aisle right away. He stood with one hand resting on the overhead bin and looked at Nadia. "Are you all right?" he asked. It was such a simple question. Nadia had been managing for so many hours that the simplicity of it came at the wrong angle. "I don't know yet," she said. "I will be. I need to see my mother first." James nodded. "How long has she been in the hospital?" 4 days. They're calling it a cardiac event, which is what they say when they want more time to decide what to call it. "Is she—" He stopped himself. "I'm sorry. You don't know me." "No," Nadia agreed. "But you're carrying my bag, so we're somewhere past strangers." He sat down across the aisle from them then, and Maya immediately turned from the window. "Do you ride in first class every time?" "Usually." Yes." "Is it because you own the planes?" "Partly. Partly because my knees don't fit in coach anymore." Maya looked at his legs. "They look normal." "They are, mostly. It's the seats that aren't." Nadia covered her mouth with her hand and looked at the seat pocket in front of her. This was the thing about being in genuine distress. Sometimes a small, ordinary thing cracked you open in ways the big things couldn't, because the big things you braced for. The small things arrived before you had your armor on. Patricia came through the cabin with water and a small tray of warm nuts that she set on Nadia's armrest tray without being asked. She crouched slightly beside Maya's seat. "Would you like juice, sweetheart? We have apple and orange." "Apple, please," Maya said. Then she remembered. "Please and thank you." Both accepted, Patricia said, and went to get it. When she came back, she handed it to Maya and then looked at Nadia with the direct, personal clarity of a woman addressing another woman when the surrounding language had been cleared away. "I heard what happened at the gate," she said quietly. I'm sorry you came through that. You should not have had to. The apology had no padding around it. No if you felt or it wasn't our intention or we regret any confusion you may have experienced. Just the plain thing. Nadia felt it land accordingly. Thank you, she said. Patricia's gaze moved briefly to James, then back to Nadia. If you need anything on this flight, I mean anything, you ring for me. She said it the way people said things they meant to be taken literally. Then she moved on. Maya watched her go. Do I like her? So do I, James said. She's nicer than that gate man. Most people are, Nadia said. Maya sipped her juice and looked out the window at the tarmac, where baggage carts moved in their efficient patterns, and a ground crew member in an orange vest signaled to someone below a wing. The aircraft hummed with the low pre-departure energy of a thing about to become something else, a machine about to become flight. Your mother, James said after the cabin had settled and the door had been closed. Gloria, was it? Nadia looked at him. Maya told you. She did. What's she like? Nadia was quiet for a moment. It was not a hard question. It was, in fact, one of the easiest questions anyone could ask her. When the difficulty was that easy questions about people you loved were sometimes the hardest ones to answer when you were frightened for them. She says things that are true without making them complicated, Nadia said, which was Maya's line, but it fit. James smiled at that. Maya mentioned. She got it from her grandmother. Then it runs in a straight line. Nadia looked at her daughter, who was narrating something to herself quietly against the window. An ongoing interior story involving the baggage cart and a stuffed rabbit she had named Senator. She does, Nadia said. Run straight. They were quiet for a while, the kind of quiet that settled between people who had been through something together without choosing to be, and were now deciding what that meant. James spoke first. Can I ask you something? You can. When he told you to step aside, when he said the boarding pass didn't correspond to an active reservation, what did you feel? Nadia looked at the seat back in front of her, not because the answer was there, because the answer needed a direction to move in before she could say it. Tired, she said, not surprised, which is almost worse than surprised, because surprise means it's new. James said nothing. He had asked the question, and he was letting it have its full space, which was more than most people did. I kept thinking, Nadia continued, that I needed to stay calm, not because I was calm, because I knew that if I raised my voice, if I showed anything but patience, it would become about that instead, about my reaction instead of his action. She paused. So that is an exhausting thing to know, and to know that you know it, and to do it anyway. James was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said, it is. The aircraft began to move. Maya gasped slightly at the initial sensation and pressed her forehead to the glass. We're going, she announced. Mama, we're going. I see that, baby. We're going to Grandma Gloria. We are. Maya turned back from the window and looked at James with an expression that had settled from scrutiny into something warmer. Did you have a grandma? I did. What was she like? James leaned back. Stubborn, kind. Believed that the correct response to injustice was first prayer and then practical action in that order, and that if you skipped the first one, you were moving too fast, and if you stopped at the first one, you weren't moving fast enough. Maya blinked. That's a lot. She was a lot. Is she gone? She is. I'm sorry, Maya said, with the earnest directness of children who had not yet learned to dress that phrase up with anything extra. Thank you, James said, and received it the same way it was given, plain and without ceremony. The aircraft lifted. Memphis was an hour and 15 minutes away. Outside the window, Atlanta fell away beneath them, in the particular way cities fell away from altitude. First the grid of streets, then the pale rectangles of rooftops, then the green that pushed back against all of it, persistent and indifferent, until the whole thing softened into geography and distance erased the details. Nadia sat back and let herself feel the ascent beneath her. It was not peace. It was not even relief. Not yet. But there was something in the leaving of a place that held your humiliation that came close enough. She had the boarding passes in her purse. She had the confirmation email. She had the bank statement she had been prepared to show, and had never needed to show because the scanner had said what the scanner said the moment someone finally pointed it at the truth. James spoke without looking at her, looking instead out the window at the retreating skyline. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. Nadia turned toward him. "Xian, you don't owe me anything. I own the company that gave a man like that a uniform and a podium and 11 years of unchecked authority over which passengers felt welcome and which ones did not." He said it without drama, the way a person stated a debt they intended to honor rather than minimize. "That is not your burden, but it is my responsibility. What will happen to him? That depends on what the footage shows, and on whether the prior complaints say what I think they say. You think there were others? Men like Derek Holt do not become men like Derek Holt on the first try," he said. "They are made gradually by the absence of consequence." He turned from the window and looked at her directly. "I am going to find out who else was made to feel the way you were made to feel this morning. One, I am going to make certain that what I find cannot be quietly filed away." Maya had fallen into that light aircraft doze that children fell into when their bodies decided the emergency was over, and rest was now appropriate. She was curled slightly toward the window, the stuffed rabbit named Senator propped against the glass, her juice cup half empty in the cup holder. Her sun backpack was in the overhead bin. Her shoes were still on because Nadia had not had the heart to wake her to take them off. "She was the one who stopped it," Nadia said quietly. "At the gate, before any of it changed. She was the one who said scan it." James looked at the sleeping child. "I know. She's 7. I know." He paused. "Our children are sometimes the only ones in a room who haven't been taught to leave room for the wrong person to be right." Nadia looked at her daughter and felt the particular love that arrived when a person you loved showed you something in themselves you had not yet known was there. Maya had stood at that desk without fear. Not because she did not understand what was happening, because she understood it completely and decided it was wrong, and said so before the adults around her had finished calculating the cost of saying so. "I should have been the one to say scan it," Nadia said. "You said everything that needed to be said," James told her. "You said it clearly, and you said it with more patience than was required of you. You did not make a mistake at that gate. He did." "I know that," Nadia said. "It's just that knowing it and feeling it are not always in the same room at the same time." "No," James agreed. "They rarely are." Patricia came through the cabin again and paused at their row. She looked at Maya sleeping and smiled briefly. Then she handed Nadia a small folded note on airline stationery. "From Marcus Webb, Operations Supervisor. He wanted this in your hands before we land." Nadia unfolded it. The note was brief. It confirmed that the gate incident had been logged. It provided a case number. It listed Marcus's direct line and email, and at the bottom, in handwritten ink that was slightly different from the typed text, "Your statement will be requested at your convenience. There is no deadline. What happened should not have happened." Nadia read the last sentence twice. Then she folded the note and placed it in her purse beside the boarding passes. "Paper remembers," James said, watching her. "My mother says something like that," Nadia replied. "Put it in writing so the truth doesn't have to depend on anyone's memory." "She's right. She usually is. It's one of the more inconvenient things about her." James smiled. The first full one she had seen from him. It changed his face the way full smiles change the faces of people who did not give them easily. It made him look less like someone carrying something and more like the person he might have been before. Whatever he was carrying arrived. Nadia asked him then, because the altitude and the hour and the low hum of the aircraft had stripped away the usual courtesies that made the question feel too personal. "Why did you walk over? You could have kept walking." James was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I heard a child's voice. Maya." She was telling a stranger that her mother hadn't done anything wrong, with complete certainty. No wobble in it. He paused. "You can hear the difference between a child who is afraid and a child who is clear. She was clear, and clearness in a child in a situation like that usually means the adults have failed to be clear first." Nadia looked at the seat in front of her. And I've been that child," he said. "A long time ago, standing beside someone I loved while someone with a little bit of power decided to spend it on the wrong thing. I did not have enough authority then to stop it the way I should have." He looked toward the window. One, I have it now. You said you heard a child's voice, Nadia said. You didn't say you saw who was at the gate. I didn't need to. The voice was enough. He told her then, with the measured quiet of a man who did not offer this often, about his sister. Her name was Diane. She was 4 years older than him and had raised him for 2 of his most critical years when their mother was ill and their father was absent in the way some fathers were absent, not physically gone, but emotionally uninhabitable. Diane had worked 2 jobs and kept their apartment and made sure James got to school, and she had done all of this with the grace of someone who did not consider it extraordinary, because it needed to be done, and she was the one to do it. When James was 19 and Diane was 23, they had traveled together by air for the first time. A family occasion, a cousin's wedding in Houston. They had dressed carefully for it. They had arrived early, and at the gate, a gate agent had looked at Diane's boarding pass and decided something before he looked at it properly, and had made Diane prove herself in front of a full gate for 20 minutes, while James stood beside her, not yet knowing how to stop it, not yet holding anything in his hands with enough weight to make the room change. Diane had never complained about it, not then, not after. She had the quality of women who had already accepted that the world required extra proof from them and had decided to provide it without drama, because drama cost energy she needed elsewhere. James had never forgotten that, had never forgiven himself the early helplessness of it, and had spent the decades since building something large enough that helplessness was no longer the only available response. She sounds like she was extraordinary, Nadia said. She was, James said. She still is. She's in Houston now, retired, growing tomatoes in her backyard and telling her grandchildren things that are true without making them complicated. Nadia almost laughed. She and my mother would get along. I suspect they would make everyone around them mildly uncomfortable and entirely better off. Maya woke 20 minutes before landing. She woke with the immediate full alertness she always brought to situations she had decided were important. Blinking twice, taking in the cabin, the altitude, the light through the window, and then James across the aisle. As though confirming that the last several hours had in fact been real and not something she had assembled in a dream. Are we almost there? She asked. Almost, Nadia said. Is Grandma going to be awake? I don't know yet, baby. We'll find out. Maya nodded solemnly. She accepted uncertainty the way she accepted most hard things, directly and without excess. Then she looked at James. Are you coming to Memphis too? I am. For work? Yes. Will you check on our grandma? Maya, Nadia said. He has power, Maya reasoned. Power should be used. James said, I'm not a doctor. But you could make sure the doctors are doing a good job, Maya said, with the absolute certainty of a child who believed that large problems had solutions, and that the solutions were usually logistical. I can ask, James said. Oh, that's the honest answer. Maya considered this. Okay, asking is good. Grandma Gloria says the first step to anything getting fixed is somebody asking out loud. James looked at Nadia. She really does run straight. She always has, Nadia said. Memphis International was smaller than Atlanta and quieter in the way smaller airports were quieter. Less like institutions and more like places where actual people arrived to go to actual places that mattered to them. The sky over the city was the low pale gray of a November afternoon, and the terminal windows gave out onto a tarmac that looked cold and purposeful. Nadia gathered her things as the aircraft taxied. She put the boarding passes back in her wallet. She put Marcus's note beside them. She put James's business card, in which he had written his direct number on the back of during the flight, inside the card slot. She zipped the wallet shut and placed it in her purse and held the purse on her lap. Patricia came to them as the other passengers filed past. She did not hurry them. She waited until the aisle cleared and then crouched beside Maya's seat one more time. How's Senator? She asked, nodding at the rabbit. Maya held him up. He's okay. He slept most of the way. Smart rabbit, Patricia said. Then she straightened and looked at Nadia. Whatever happens at the hospital, she said, I hope it goes the way it should. The plainness of that. The way she said whatever happens rather than I'm sure everything will be fine or I'll say a prayer. The willingness to acknowledge uncertainty as real rather than rushing to paper over it with comfort. Nadia received it the way she had received every honest thing this flight had offered, gratefully and without wasting it. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." Patricia simply nodded, the nod of someone who knew when a moment had been completed and did not need to extend it. James carried the bag again at the jet bridge. Nadia had decided not to argue about it because it was being done without performance, and arguments against things done without performance had always seemed to her the wrong kind of argument to have. They walked into the terminal together, and the Memphis air reached them before they found the exit. The particular smell of a different city that announced itself through HVAC systems and coffee carts, and the regional frequency of vowels in the announcements overhead. Maya held her mother's hand and looked around the terminal with fresh eyes, because Maya always had fresh eyes for new places. She noticed a bookstore. She noticed a sleeping man whose shoes were untied. She noticed a little girl about her own age across the corridor being lifted by a man who was probably her father. She noticed, lastly, that her mother's grip on her hand had changed. It had tightened slightly, not in fear, but in anticipation. The compression of a person who was close enough to something that mattered that their body was registering it ahead of their mind. "We're close," Maya said. "The hospital's about 20 minutes, Nadia said. "I know. I meant to Grandma." She looked up at her mother. "I can feel it when you're close to her. You hold my hand different." Nadia looked down at their joined hands. She had not known she did that. She filed it away in the part of her that kept the things Maya showed her about herself. It was a large part, and it grew every year. James stopped at the terminal exit with them. He had a car coming, his own arrangement, and he had already made clear he would not insert himself into what came next. He understood the shape of what was ahead of them, and he understood that it belonged to them and not to him. "Will you write the statement?" he asked Nadia. "When you're ready, not now. When you're ready." "Yes," she said. "I'll write everything. Not just the words he used, the sequence of it. The fact that he looked at me before he looked at the past. The way the public watching changed what he felt, but not what he had already done." She paused. "And the fact that my 7-year-old was the first person in that gate area to say the plain, true thing." "That goes in," James said. "All of it. Will it matter?" He answered her the same way he had answered her on the plane, without padding and without performance. "It already matters. The footage matters. The prior complaints matter. Your statement will make it impossible to call this a misunderstanding, which is what institutions call things when they want the truth to behave less like truth and more like opinion." Nadia nodded. Maya, who had been listening with the bottomless patience she brought to conversations she sensed were important, tugged her mother's sleeve. "Is he going to fix it, Mama?" Nadia looked at James. "Are you going to fix it?" James said. "I'm going to make sure that what Derek Holt did this morning is attached to his name in every official record this company keeps. And I'm going to make sure that the system that let him do it more than once gets looked at by people whose job it is to make sure it changes." He paused. "That is not the same as fixing it, but it is where fixing begins." Maya thought about this with the concentrated seriousness she brought to all things that involved justice and logistics. "Okay," she said finally. "That's good enough for today." James looked at her for a moment with an expression that was not quite a smile and not quite something else, but was somewhere between the two in a place that seemed entirely his own. "Thank you, Maya. That means something." "You're welcome," she said. And then, "You're still third. Behind Grandma Gloria and Peach Cobbler, but you moved up from fourth." "What was fourth?" Maya considered. "The apple juice on the plane." James laughed then, the real one, the same kind he had laughed on the aircraft, brief and without anything held back. It arrived and departed and left the terminal a slightly different temperature. Nadia looked at him in the aftermath of it. "Thank you," she said, "not for the power of it, for the way you used it." He shook his head once. "Thank your daughter. She was the one who made me stop walking." The car to the hospital was a rideshare Nadia had booked from the plane. It arrived in 3 minutes. The driver was a young man who asked how their flight was, and Nadia said fine, and he nodded and pulled into Memphis traffic and did not ask again, which was exactly the right amount of conversation. Maya sat beside her mother in the back seat and looked out the window at the city. Memphis was river and music and long flat streets, and the particular dignity of a place that had survived more than most cities were asked to survive and kept going anyway. Maya did not know all of this yet. She was 7, but she looked at it with the attention she brought to all new things, as though storing it for later, for the version of herself that would know what to do with it. "Mama," she said, as they passed a church with a hand-painted sign out front. "Yes. Do you think Grandma Gloria knows we're coming?" "She knows we're coming. I told her yesterday. But do you think she knows we're almost there?" Nadia looked out the window at the gray sky over the river, somewhere to the west. As invisible from here, but present in the way large things were present, even when you couldn't see them. "Grandma Gloria knows most things before she's told," she said. "That's what happens when you've been paying attention for 71 years. Maya nodded. "I want to pay attention for 71 years. "You're off to a good start," Nadia said. The hospital was a mid-sized regional medical center that smelled like all hospitals smelled, antiseptic and linoleum, and the particular indoor climate of places that were always working at something. The front desk directed them to the cardiac unit on the 4th floor. The elevator was slow, and Nadia watched the numbers change with the focus of someone who had nothing left to spend on patients except patience. The cardiac unit was quieter than the floors below it. The hallway had the hushed efficiency of a place where the stakes were too high for noise. Nadia found the room number, 412, and stopped outside the door. Maya looked up at her. "Are you okay?" "I'm about to be," Nadia said. She knocked once, gently, and pushed the door open. Gloria Cole was 71 years old and had a cardiac monitor attached to her chest and an IV line in her left arm, and was sitting upright in the hospital bed, reading a paperback novel with her reading glasses pushed to the end of her nose. She looked up when the door opened. Her face went from concentration to something else in a single movement, something open and unguarded and entirely herself. "My girls," she said. Maya ran the last 6 feet. Gloria held her granddaughter with both arms and laughed, and the laugh was rich and complete, when nothing diminished in it despite the monitors and the IV and the 4 days of being in a place no one wanted to be. She was a woman who laughed from the bottom of things, and the bottom of things had not changed. Nadia crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand and held it. Gloria looked at her over Maya's head, at the particular careful expression Nadia was wearing, and a mother's knowledge passed between them without language. "What happened?" Gloria asked. "We're here," Nadia said. "That's the first thing." "I know you're here. I'm asking what happened on the way." Maya lifted her head from her grandmother's shoulder. "A mean man at the airport said Mama's boarding pass was fake, but it wasn't, and I told him. And a man who owns the planes came and fixed it, and now the mean man is going to be in trouble." Gloria looked at her granddaughter, then at her daughter, then back at her granddaughter. "Start over," she said. "Slower, from the beginning." Maya started over, slower, from the beginning, and this time she included the part about the apple juice, and the lady named Patricia, and the man named Senator the Rabbit, and the way James Caldwell laughed when she told him he was third. Gloria listened to all of it with her hand in Nadia's, and her eyes moving between them and the look on her face that had always meant she was deciding what this meant before she decided what to say about it. When Maya finished, Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That little girl at the gate, the one telling the man to scan the pass. Who was she?" Maya blinked. "That was me, Grandma." Gloria squeezed her hand. "I know it was, baby. I just wanted to hear you say it." Later, after the doctor had come by and explained things in the careful language of people who were beginning to have enough information to be cautiously optimistic, and after Maya had fallen asleep in the vinyl chair in the corner with Senator across her chest, Nadia sat with her mother in the quiet of the room and told the rest of the story. The parts Maya had skipped, the particular expression on Derek Holt's face before the scanner, the way the gate area had gone still, the way James Caldwell had not announced himself but had simply arrived and asked the plainest question available, the way the apology had landed because it had not tried to soften itself. Gloria listened without interrupting, and the monitors above the bed beeped with the steady patience of machines that existed only to confirm you were still here. When Nadia finished, Gloria said, "What are you going to do about it?" "He asked me to write a statement." "Then write it." I know. Write the whole thing, Gloria said. Don't just write what he said. Write what it felt like to stand there knowing your past was valid and having someone tell you it wasn't. Write what it cost to stay calm. Write what your daughter did. Write that part especially, because that is the part that will matter the longest. Nadia looked at her mother. Why that part? Because 10 years from now, Gloria said, Maya is going to be a woman standing somewhere in public, and someone is going to try to make her prove she belongs. And she's going to have to decide what to do about that. And what she does will come from what she learned today. And what she learned today is that the truth does not retreat just because someone with a name tag tells it to. Nadia felt her eyes go hot. She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose for a moment and breathed. She said he decided before he looked, she said. Gloria nodded slowly. She was right. She's 7, Mama. 7-year-olds who grow up beside women like you learn to see clearly early, Gloria said. Don't be surprised by it. Just make sure she never loses it. Nadia wrote the statement the following morning at a small desk in the corner of a hotel room 2 blocks from the hospital, while Maya slept and the Memphis morning arrived pale and quiet through the curtains. She wrote it exactly as she had lived it. She did not soften the language. She did not remove the part about the long pause before the scanner. She did not remove the description of Derek Holt's face when he said this boarding pass did not come from our system, the particular combination of performance and certainty it wore, the absence in it of anything that resembled genuine process. She wrote Maya's words in full. Both times. The first time Maya said his mommy's boarding pass is real, she bought it, I was there. And the second time, he decided before he looked. She wrote them as direct quotations and she did not apologize for the source. She wrote about what she had felt standing at that desk, the exhaustion of managing her own reaction because she knew what happened to women who did not manage it. The particular loneliness of being correct in a public place and having that correctness treated as evidence of a problem. She wrote about her mother in the hospital and the fact that she had arrived at that gate already carrying more than anyone should carry into a routine boarding process, and that Derek Holt had added to that load with both hands and called it procedure. She did not write it with hatred. She wrote it with accuracy, which in the end was sharper. She emailed it to James Caldwell's direct address and to the legal address he had provided. Then she sat for a moment with her hands in her lap and looked at the window where the curtain was lit pale gold at its edge by a sun that was still climbing. Her phone buzzed within 20 minutes. James Caldwell's message was 4 lines. Received. Read in full. It's clear and complete and exactly what it needed to be. Derek Holt was terminated for cause this morning, effective immediately. Prior complaints are under formal review. Station policy revision begins next week. Gloria Cole is lucky in her daughter and her granddaughter. Nadia read it twice. Then she set the phone down and sat with it for a while. Not because she needed more time to understand it, because certainty, when it finally arrived after long uncertainty, sometimes needed a moment to be received at full volume. She went back to the hospital at 9. Maya came with her, wearing a clean yellow shirt and her son backpack, even though they were not going anywhere that required a backpack, because Maya carried it when she wanted to feel prepared. And today she felt that preparation was appropriate. Gloria was better. The doctors had moved from cautiously optimistic to something closer to cautiously definite. There had been a small blockage, manageable, addressable, the kind they could treat with medication and monitoring, and the lifestyle adjustments that doctors described in brisk terms and patients received with complicated feelings. Gloria had received the information with the expression of someone who had already suspected the truth and was now simply being given the official paperwork on it. So I have to change what I eat, she said to the cardiologist, who was young and thorough, and looked slightly braced for the response. Among other things, yes. And walk more. Yes. And worry less, Gloria said. I imagine that's in there too. It is recommended, yes. Gloria looked at Nadia. You hear that? Moss, the doctor says worry less. I heard, Nadia said. That applies to you too then. Mama. I'm the one in the hospital. I get to make it apply to whoever I want. The cardiologist made a note that might have been medical and might have been something he was going to tell his residents later. He excused himself shortly after, and they were alone again, the 3 of them, in the room with the monitors and the November light. Maya climbed carefully onto the bed beside Gloria and sat cross-legged facing her grandmother. "I told you the whole story," she said. "Even the apple juice part." "You did," Gloria said. "Did I tell it right?" Gloria looked at Nadia. Nadia looked at her daughter. "You told it true," Gloria said, "which is better than right." Maya considered that the way she considered things she intended to keep. "Hey, Grandma," she said. "Yes, baby." "The man at the gate, he's gone now. He got in trouble." "I know, your mama told me." "Was it enough?" Maya asked. The question was simple. It was not rhetorical. It was the genuine inquiry of a child who wanted to understand how justice was measured. Gloria was quiet for a moment. The monitor above her beeped its patient rhythm. Outside the window, the city moved in its ordinary ways, traffic and birds and the slow grind of a morning in a river town that had survived harder things than this. "It's a beginning," Gloria said at last. "Enough is a long road, but beginnings are real, and a beginning is more than a lot of people get." Maya absorbed this. "Okay," she said. "Then I'm satisfied for now." Gloria laughed. Nadia laughed with her. And the room for that moment held all three of them inside something that was not exactly joy and not exactly relief, but was the particular warmth that arrived when hard truth had been followed all the way to where it was supposed to go, and the people who had carried it were still standing. 3 days later, Nadia Cole flew home to Atlanta. She had stayed longer than planned because staying longer than planned was what you did when your mother was in a hospital and then out of danger and then going home with new instructions and a bag of prescriptions that someone needed to organize and explain. Gloria had not asked her to stay. That was how Nadia knew she needed to. Maya made friends with 2 of the nurses on the cardiac floor and left them drawings of the hospital that were anatomically creative and medically ambitious, and that both nurses said they were keeping. She told the story of the gate to everyone who asked and several people who hadn't, and the story grew with each telling in the particular way stories grew when the person telling them was 7 and had been present for something important and understood its weight. At the Atlanta airport on the return, Nadia stood in the boarding queue for Group 1 and held her boarding pass ready. The gate agent this time was a woman in her 40s who took the phone, scanned it cleanly, handed it back with a warm gesture and said, "Have a great flight, Miss Cole." 4 words, clean and simple and utterly ordinary. Nadia said thank you and meant it at a depth the gate agent could not have known about, and walked through toward the jet bridge with Maya beside her and her bag on her shoulder. Maya said, "She scanned it right away." "She did." "Good," Maya said. "That's how it's supposed to work." "Yes," Nadia said. "That's exactly how it's supposed to work." What she carried home with her, along with a bag of her mother's cooking and a card the nurses had signed and a paperback Gloria had finished and insisted she take, was the boarding pass. Both of them, there in return, tucked together in her wallet behind her ID. She did not keep them as evidence of the humiliation. She kept them as evidence of the moment the humiliation failed. There was a difference. She intended to remember it. James Caldwell sent one more message. 2 weeks later. It was brief. The formal review of prior complaints had identified 4 other passengers, 3 women and 1 elderly man, who had experienced similar treatment from Derek Holt over an 18-month period. 2 had agreed to provide updated statements. A 3rd was in conversation with the legal team. The 4th had not responded but remained in the file. A company-wide revision of passenger complaint escalation procedures had been announced internally. Station managers at Hartsfield-Jackson had completed mandatory retraining. The policy language around boarding pass verification had been rewritten to remove the subjective discretion that had given men like Derek Holt the room to call judgment procedure. When Nadia read the message at her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning with coffee going and Maya at school and the ordinary hum of her apartment around her, she read it once, then again, then set the phone down. She thought about the 4 other people, particularly the women. She thought about the ones who had filed complaints and had those complaints categorized as misunderstandings and then had moved on because moving on was what you did when the system gave you no other option and you had places to be. She thought about what it had cost them to tell the truth into a structure that had not been designed to receive it seriously. And she thought about what it meant that the structure was now, slowly and imperfectly, being redesigned. She thought about Maya saying he decided before he looked. She thought about Gloria saying, "Write the part about your daughter especially." because that is the part that will matter the longest. She thought about Diane, James Caldwell's sister, growing tomatoes in Houston, who had stood at a gate 20-something years ago and proven herself in front of strangers and gone on with her life, and never made it a complaint and never made it a defining story, and had simply carried it the way women carried the things the world insisted they carry, quietly and without being compensated for the weight. She picked up her phone and wrote back to James Caldwell. One line, "Thank you for making sure it didn't disappear." His reply came quickly. "Thank your daughter. She's the one who made it impossible to look away." This story is a reminder that dignity is not granted by a gate agent and a boarding pass scanner or a company uniform. It belongs to every person who walks through a door, stands in a line, and asks to be treated as exactly what they are, someone who paid for a seat, has somewhere important to be, and does not need to prove that they belong. It is also a reminder that children see clearly. They have not yet learned to mistake silence for peace or patience for acceptance. Nadia Cole stood at a gate with no authority and no power and said the plainest true thing available, scan it. She did not wait for permission. She did not calculate the cost. She simply refused to let a lie go uncontested in front of her mother. Most of all, this story says that accountability is not the same as revenge. Accountability is the process of ensuring that what happened is recorded, that the record is honest, and that honesty is given enough teeth that it cannot simply be filed and forgotten. It is slow. It is imperfect. It is rarely as satisfying in the doing as it sounds in the telling. But it is real, and real is more than most injustice ever receives. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell us, what would you have done at that gate? Would you have spoken up? And if someone you love had been treated the way Nadia was treated, what would you have wanted the people watching to do? We read every comment. We will be here for the next story. Thank you for watching.